Welcome to MMT Chats. This episode is brought to you by ISCAR with new ideas for machining intelligently. Hey MMT followers, Christina Fuges with Moldmaking Technology back for another quick MMT chat. My guest today is Bob Schiavone, who is Global Marketing Director at RD Leverage in Lee Summit, Missouri. And although RD Leverage is an impressive mold manufacturer for the packaging industry, Bob is here today to talk about his passion, which is plastics. So hello, Bob.
Hello.
All right, so I've known you for a long time. I know you and I have had several conversations, mostly at trade shows, about this war on plastics, which I know has only fueled your passion for standing up for this industry. Plus, I see that you are very active on social media, LinkedIn, posting and sharing and commenting on all things plastics, which shouldn't surprise me because you are a seasoned marketing professional. But everybody should take a lesson on that because that's how we get conversation started. But before we get into that, why don't you first tell everybody who's watching who you are? What is your current position? And give a little bit of your work history so we can know who you are.
I appreciate it. First, thanks for doing this. I've been in plastics about 25 years. I started at Conair, the auxiliary company. And from there, I went to Precise Technology, which was a company who bought Courtesy Corporation, which was a huge acquisition at that time. And then Rexam bought us, which everybody remembers Rexam buying up a whole bunch of plastics companies. So I've been in it about 25 years and always in the marketing capacity of marketing. So I've kind of been lucky because, well, you probably know as well as I do, that marketing is a tough beast to push or sell or understand in our industry. It generally is. Yeah. So, but that's allowed me to kind of create a neat little niche, if you will. I love the community. I've worked with some of the smartest people I've ever met. And so it's a great industry. And so I've had a lot of experience to work with a lot of different people over the years. And now here I am at R&D Leverage. And I didn't spend a lot of time on the mold making side, mostly on the processor side for most of my career until R&D Leverage. And that's, I think, kicked up my passion more, knowing what I knew from the converter side and then taking that and being on the other side of that business. It's helped me learn a lot about how people think and act and promote around our industry. So,
all right. Sorry. So let's take that learning. You learned a lot from those two worlds, but where does this passion come for plastics in general? Where does that come from?
I think after seeing a lot of things happen in our industry, well, let's see, when I started, the passion started with the fight for the onshoring, the fight for keeping the manufacturing in America. It started with that challenge. And then we've seen some things improve there. And then I think a lot of the passion is just the people in this industry. And I've seen a lot of people kind of get hurt along the way. And I kind of feel for that, watching through acquisitions, a lot of plant closures and changes. My passion's always been, I think I find some of the smartest, most compassionate and passionate people in the business is in plastics. Plus the product itself is amazing. So my passion is now seeing what's happening in our industry is killing me. It's driving me nuts. So yes, you're right that everyone who knows me or sees me usually gets the popcorn out when I start, having a conversation about the business. So
exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything you said. The whole plastics and even my little niche of mold manufacturing, it's a community of compassionate, passionate people. And I love that. So when an issue impacts them, like we feel it too. And we want to do what we can to help them overcome those.
Right.
So, all right, so let's talk about it. So what do you see right now as the biggest threat to the plastics industry as a whole?
Communication and perception. We are losing. We've been losing that perception battle for a while. Now, it might be that marketing brain of mine. I look at human behavior and try to tie that into why are we doing the things we're doing. I think it's just so frustrating for me because, like I said, we have some of the smartest, most passionate people in the business, but we talk amongst ourselves. Let's take polymer scientists, people who know the data better than anybody, and they'll prove every one of those things that we see on television about evil plastics and all that. They'll prove all that wrong, and they feel very proud of it. But none of that does any good in communicating to the consumer. My biggest passion, a dream that I have that I've been told and laughed at, that we don't connect to the consumer in the plastics industry. That is the end, these are the people buying the end product. Yep. So their perception of plastics is horrible. It has been for a while, and it's grown to a point where we've lost a lot of that battle. You see TV commercials, every one of your viewers, you see the commercials. Smart marketing people are using that perception issue to turn their packaging around to prove how throw away the plastics. You don't need plastics, and look at our new package. The reality is recycling is broken. In fact, we never really had it in this country. And what's frustrating to me is when that started to happen, when I seen that happen, when China stopped taking our recycling, is when we began to panic. And I think that was the 80s, late 80s. No, I'm sorry, mid 90s. And when that happened, that's when I seen things started to change. And so suddenly the virtual signaling of the turtles with the straws and the litter, it turned from a litter issue to just a plastics issue. That's frustrating to me. Bottom line, unless we want to get rid of, just use bottles, for example, unless we have a plan to remove all vessels for all packaging, PET is the gold standard. PET is by far the greenest solution. Facts, hands down, all the data to prove it. But we're losing that battle because instead we have a government right now who's enforcing taxes, as you heard, on virgin material. This argument totally frustrates me. When I hear now that the mandates are being put out that we are supposed to start using more regrind material, right? We're supposed to start using more recycled material. So what do the brand owners do? They hop on that bandwagon because that's what the consumer is saying they want, basically driven by a poor perception campaign. How in the hell are we supposed to use more recycled material when we don't have the recycled material? Recycling is broken. It is broken. We never had it right in this country. I've had good arguments on that side where people will tell you, give you the data and say, it's not just recycling. We have been recycling. We're not. The recycling that we do, half of it is, goes into landfills. If you take, if you take the high density polypropylene, those materials are very difficult, like your laundry detergent bottles, they don't get cleaned, right? These are the things that we should be addressing versus banning. And so it's
so all right, so in a nutshell, and I agree with you, it's misinformation and the lack of communication. And like how you're saying, it's a perception problem versus using the term marketing, because I always say it's a gigantic marketing problem, but which is always about communication. So what's interesting about, I agree with things that you're saying. I think it's a shame that a lot of people, common everyday people, think they're recycling and you're really not. Like even just on an individual consumer level, like we just don't have the grips on that. And I always blame it on until some corporation or somebody figures out a way to make money from it. It's not really going to take off. We're a capitalistic society. Like we haven't really figured that out. But that's a whole other topic. But what do you think about in terms of the perception on plastics? COVID. When I think of just, again, the mold making niche, COVID put this huge, and what I thought was a brilliant, wonderful light on the value of molds, where people that I know didn't even know what one was now recognize, and on the consumer level, like knowing that all that equipment that we needed was molds and making plastic products. So that had to help this. You would like to think it would be a lasting effect. I don't know that it will be. But any comment on that, like the COVID impact of the perception of plastics?
That's a really good point, and it was frustrating for me to see that finally, and then it disappeared. We got this big boost of right before COVID, as you know, we were real heavy on the whole banning again. It was ban, and then that message disappeared because they needed us for all the PPE, and they needed us for all these things. Here's what we missed. Again, we missed the boat in this industry. We should have capitalized on that. We need a marketing campaign. It's a lot of work and it's very expensive. I get that. But we need to educate the consumer. So we should have took that and used that as a great example. Plastics are not evil, but we've convinced many people that they are. It's frustrating. It
So
really.
how do you, when you see these issues, how do you see them directly impacting like mold makers, the mold making
Hmm.
industry, and what advice do you have for those types of operations to meet these challenges head on?
It's tough. Mold making is probably better than anybody. We are a small community, but we don't. Um, we're not really good at verbalizing, communicating, marketing either.
Yeah.
Overall, in general, we're not really good at it. We'd rather look at an acquisition or a new piece of equipment versus a marketing campaign. Um,
Yes.
all those things work, but it's how we do it together. Mold makers have always been, we've allowed to commoditize our industry. It's based more on price and that versus value. I think what we've been doing more and more of is make sure we're connecting with that end customer, okay, so that mold makers understand we need to not wait for and knee jerk react, but be proactive. And if we're talking about, for an example, all the things that are happening with raw material changes, for example, we need to be more proactive in that communication with our customers versus waiting and kind of sitting back and seeing what's coming down the pike, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense, which is a general theme that since we launched the magazine, is teaching mold builders to inject themselves earlier in the process on any issue with the customer. So this
Yeah,
is just, that makes them a better vendor for them, right? So this is just another issue where they can really make themselves stand out if they're getting involved earlier and earlier in any kind of project. So it's funny how that's that same theme.
it
Same
is the
theme.
same. It really, it's some probably in general, not just marketing in terms of marketing, overall business and how you operate your business in terms of being a mold maker. It's always been the sooner you involve the mold maker up front in that
Yeah.
design process, the
Yep.
better off everybody's going to be. But that is, for some reason, very difficult because
I know.
and I don't think it's as much as the mold maker's fault. It's the industry's allowed ourselves to. Mold makers are kind of put, we're in the background, but yet
Yep.
we're a critical part for that launch.
Yep.
It's the most critical part, but yet
It
it's the
is.
most silent part. And
And I
we
say,
shouldn't be silent anymore.
no, we shouldn't be silent. And I always look at them as kind of like unsung heroes in the whole manufacturing process because everyone just thinks and especially nowadays, they think you're just hitting a button and these parts are coming out of nowhere when really there's still tooling involved. These guys and gals are critical to that. All right, so R&D leverage is a mold manufacturer. So what are the types of things you see the R&D leverage doing to help face this war on plastics challenge and this misinformation?
Just we continue to communicate, reach out to customers, use our marketing. I mean, that's what I'm there for, to give them that edge to communicate. Marketing isn't always about leads. Marketing is about promotion and branding and messaging. So I've been lucky because R&D leverage has always been a little bit, we're a very entrepreneurial company, very unique. And again, I talk about those past experiences I've had. We're very unique. Listen to people. We listen to what they have to say. We may not always want to do it, but your words matter. So we've diversified a lot in our offerings. So we're one of the only tool shops that I know of. I don't still know of any other tool shop that offers IBM, injection blow molds, injection stretch blow molds, and as well as injection molds in healthcare, personal care, and food and beverage. So that's allowed us to kind of follow multiple markets and multiple messaging. Makes it a difficult job for marketing because we're not focusing on one target audience, but
Got it.
that's allowed us to kind of be a little bit different. But the other thing that really makes it special is that we validate. We have a lab, and same with our UK. That's different, where the processor can get rid of all the guesswork, if you will, once the mold is going through our shop, that we can run it through on a particular press and a particular machine. So we're looking at those process windows. They're more ramped up before, rather than just shipping the mold and getting it running in their shop. So we call it our product solutions lab, and that's been pretty effective.
So when it comes to the plastics issue and kind of advocacy, like is RD leverage, or you yourself, are you involved like in anything in that world? Because that's a whole fight.
Yes, the answer is yes, but never long enough. This might not come across right, but I'll just be real. There's too many organizations right now. And I had started one way back, Support Plastics USA. It had grown.
I remember that.
it had grown, but then I started to realizing that the messaging and all these different groups were all overlapping each other. There's just too many groups. I think that my frustration is also a lot of these groups, I've seen them raise a lot of money for the plastics mission to improve recycling, messaging I've heard about. I'm not seeing any of that. So there's something that's missing here. And I think it's that marketing head that I have that I look at it and it's a communication issue more than anything. We're not working together. We're like, we have some of the smartest scientists and smartest, but yet they're not doing it. They can't, that's not their job to go out there and communicate that messaging to a consumer.
Right. Right.
Also, my business always been in marketing, B2B. It's always B2B, business to business. We need to try to look at a B2C. How can we reach the consumer? It would be like magic if we could do that.
I know.
But we have the money, we have the but anytime I bring that up, then red tape gets involved and it falls apart, and then it doesn't happen. So
yeah. And that's funny because that's the same, what you just described is the same challenge when we think about manufacturing and its perception on the workforce side, right? I've always said that's a big marketing problem too. That's business to consumer. If our next generation, the average Joe on the street, understood how exciting and innovative, rewarding, technological manufacturing is, we would have no problem finding people. But again, no one knows it. Everyone has a vision of what they think it is. So it's the same problem. And I also start to think too, we tend to all get excited and think big. We think too big. And I think we need to just start looking locally, like start working with your local community. Isn't that, I mean, when you even think about politics and changing policy, that's the smartest thing to do. I mean, anything in your community, if you want to fix it, you got to start small. You got to start within your own family and educate your families, educate your neighbors, educate your schools. So I would imagine it's the same thing to really tackle it, because I agree. There are too many groups in several aspects of our lives that have the common passion, really, but the same agenda, and then you're all trying to accomplish the same thing, so no one accomplishes anything.
Yeah. There's almost too much messaging and two different levels and too many things going on. That's the beauty of marketing, is if you do create the right campaign and it's done right, you can reach a lot of people. A lot of people. It really does work well, but it has to be done right. I just don't know why or how we can get our business collectively, our industry collectively, put those efforts and money together and run a national campaign. A national campaign. I've seen some great videos on LinkedIn that some people are doing. They're great. But again, if you're talking in terms of marketing and target audiences, that's only reaching certain people. We got to get out there and
Exactly. Yep. I mean, you're saying it. So everybody out there watching, if you have any ideas, we're starting this discussion again, or continuing this discussion. We'll put it out on social media. Let's just try to get some ideas together. Hopefully, Bob, that you've stirred it up again. And let's not forget, even though we're still in crazy times, we can't forget about this. It is the future of the industry, and we all need to be passionate about it. So last but not least, is there any final takeaway? If there's one thing you would have a viewer to do after they hear this to help this, what would you suggest that somebody do?
There's a lot of different things we could do, but let's start with just social media. We're not real good at using like LinkedIn in general. We're really not. It's not an easy thing. What's the old saying? Teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit more negative press from a lot of the people in our industry because they're like, I don't want to deal with that. It doesn't work. And it does work. LinkedIn's pretty impressive tool, I think. I didn't like it as much at first. So to answer your question, people should start trying to use it. It's not just liking something, it's commenting, it's sharing, it's also adding people to your contacts. Those little things will build up communities of information. I've watched it work, and it really does work well. So we'll start there. Start with sharing the message. Start with getting involved and putting your commentary, into a post or something. Start there.
I love it. All right. I think that's a great piece of advice. Get social and get on social media. So, all right, Bob, thank you so much for all your time today and for sharing your passion, a little bit of the background of who you are and why this is such a big issue. And to everybody watching, remember, for everything mold making related, visit moldmakingtechnology.com. Stay safe and healthy, and more importantly, stay informed and stay inspired.